Hey there. So in this video, we're going to do a deep dive into some Senza app development techniques. We're going to look at some of the pitfalls that you might encounter, and we're going to introduce a new app called the Device Gateway that lets you optimize your app development workflow and makes it easier than ever to test out your apps on the Senza platform. So the way that Senza normally works is that all your devices are in a particular tenant. Your tenant has a URL, and then every device in that tenant, when it starts up, it's going to connect to that same URL. That's great if you are deploying thousands of devices in a production environment. But as part of your development and testing process, especially if you're a member of a team that are all doing development on one tenant, it might be a little bit impractical for you to test your apps the way that you want to. So let's give an example of how you would do that today. Typically, if the tenant is set to show this app, but you want to be able to test an app that's being served as part of your local development environment, what you would typically do is bring up the debugger so that you can change the URL that the device is pointing to. Looking at the developer tools now, we can see that the app is currently pointing to this URL here. So if we want to load an app from your local computer, we typically use a tool called ngrok that creates a tunnel from the cloud to your own computer. So when I run it like this, it creates a tunnel at this URL that points to port 80 on localhost on my own computer. So if I copy that URL and then paste it here in the address field in the debugger, and then add on the path of the app that I want to test, then it's going to bring up that application served by my own computer. So if I use the arrow keys to navigate here, you can see that it highlights the selected link in yellow. I'm going to make a small change to my app to change that to purple, for example. And I'm going to hit save, and if I go here, it may or may not, I can't predict for sure, update because it is frequently cached, so that when I do this again, in this case it worked, but it didn't always work. So what you typically need to do is to disconnect and reconnect to ngrok and get a new URL like this, and then paste it in here, and then hit return again to try out your app one more time. It's not terrible, but it's a little bit of copying and pasting back and forth. So we got to wondering, what if there's a better way that you could set the URL for your tenant to an application gateway that would route traffic depending upon the device ID to the destination of your choice, and had a REST API so that you could update it when the place where you want to route the traffic to changes. So I was feeling lazy, and instead of actually writing a program, I thought I would try out some vibe coding where I asked ChatGPT to do all the work for me. So I gave it a rather long prompt where I said, hey, can you make me an application gateway that has a REST API and does all the things that I want to do and has a slick looking admin interface? And it just went and built it for me. So first I'll give you a little demo of how it works, and then I will show you some of the source code. So the first thing I'm going to do is run a little script that runs locally, and it connects to the ngrok API of the local daemon on my own computer to disconnect and then reconnect. So you'll notice here this tunnel ends in BC9C, And when I run this command, it's going to disconnect and reconnect to a new tunnel at a different link that points to that web app on my computer. And we have a little admin interface that it auto-generated for us thanks to the magic of ChatGPT and GenAI. And if I reload that, you can see that it has created an association between my device ID and that particular URL. So when I can actually close the debugger because I don't need it anymore, and I can go here and just hit the home button and it's going to reload the app. And in this case, I think we're still on purple, but if I wanted to go to, say, make it green, I just hit save. I go back here, run that command again, hit the home button, and now I've got a new version of my app, and oops, you can see that it's running the latest version. So I think that really optimizes the workflow. All you need to do is make your change, hit save, run the command again, hit the home button, and boom, you're done. And you basically don't even need to bring up the debugger unless you want to do actual debugging. So that's how it works. Let's go through and have a look at all of the components that are in the app. There's a couple different ones. So the first is the gateway. And so this was all generated by ChatGPT, but it's a pretty standard boilerplate Node.js application using Express to serve up an API as well as a couple of static HTML files. In terms of the API, we have endpoints to get the tenants and devices, the endpoints to add new ones, as well as to delete existing ones. That all powers all the functionality that you see here, where you can view, add, and delete resources. Now, I mentioned device mappings. It's also configured so that multiple tenants can use the same gateway, and you can associate a URL with a particular tenant. That way, it will always do something sensible. And even if your tenant's not found here, it'll fall back to using a default URL. So we have a REST endpoint called redirect, and what that does is it just takes a device ID and a tenant ID, and then it looks up to see if there is a device ID in the mapping, and if so, it returns that URL. Then it falls back to looking up in the tenant mapping, and then it falls back to the default URL. So that's how the server works. Let's look at the file that is served when you make a request to that endpoint, which here we're serving the app at senzadev.net/gateway. So again, it's a fairly simple program. It just loads the Senza client library that you all are familiar with and gets the device ID and the tenant from the device info object. Then it goes and makes a call to that API, again running from the same host that this page is served from, passing in the device ID and the tenant ID. And then it gets back the URL and it redirects to that URL. So it's a very simple script. So that's how that works. Now let's have a look at the Node script that is used here in this little terminal command to talk to the ngrok API and call the endpoint here that updates the URL. So the way that works is this is a script that you would run locally on your own computer just by calling node ngrok.js in the gateway folder. So the way that works is it captures the command line arguments, the ID of the device, the name of the device, and the path to your application. And then it's going to call a couple of endpoints on the ngrok API. So take note, you have to connect ngrok manually the first time so that the ngrok process is running. And then when you call localhost port 4040/APIs, you can connect to the tunnels API. So there are some endpoints that are very simple where you can get the list of tunnels that are open. You can stop a tunnel by specifying its name, and you can start a tunnel by specifying what port you want it to run on. And then we're going to have this function here for updating the device that calls the API gateway running in the cloud and then just does a post request to tell it what URL to use for that particular device ID. So when the script runs, it just does a few things. It stops the current tunnel and then starts a new one. Then it gets the current list of tunnels with the new one that you've just connected, and then it calls that update device function with the public URL of the tunnel as well as the local link. So that's how that works. And we mentioned that we also have this little admin interface that was completely auto-generated by ChatGPT. I can show you a little bit about how that works, but you'll find it's really quite standard boilerplate. We just have two sections for devices and tenants, each of which has a table for showing the current mappings, as well as a form for adding a new one. So here's the table, and then here's the form. And then on the JavaScript side, you're going to see some really simple boilerplate functions for doing all the REST API endpoints that you would expect to do for adding, viewing, and deleting devices and tenant mappings. So that's all pretty straightforward. So when you put all the pieces together, it sounds a little bit complex, but I'm going to run through the demo again, and then you'll see just how simple it is when you put the pieces together now that you know what's actually going on. So I'm going to go back to my web app and change that color one more time, hit save, and now you can see that I'm just going to call my little local script again. I've got a new tunnel. It's been updated here. You can see if I hit reload, it's going to have a different URL. And then when I go back here and I hit the home button, you'll see that my highlighting is now done in red. So you are welcome to use our shared hosted instance of the gateway right here on senzadev.net.gateway. You should be aware that if it's a shared instance, that your data will be completely public. Anyone can see it, anyone can modify it, anyone can delete it. And if we were to redeploy the application on Google Cloud, because all this is just stored in memory, it would all get erased. So if you want to have it be more secure and more private, you are welcome to run it yourself on Google Cloud. You can see some instructions in our developer portal on how to do that. And if you want, you can add additional security such as authentication, and you might want to also add some data persistence by connecting it to a database. All of that's an exercise for the reader. But for now, we hope you'll get some mileage out of using at least our shared instance, and that it will help save you time as you are working on developing your apps. So thanks for watching, and happy coding.